Martalks. I'm your host, Daryl Rosenstein. Martalks is where we discuss contemporary issues in the e-commerce and martech industries. Today we're joined by Sana Remekie, the founder of Conscia, a digital experience orchestration solution, and we're going to unpack that. And we're joined once again by Jason Cottrell. Jason, thanks for coming back. I was very fortunate a couple weeks ago to hold a webinar with three leaders of major retailers, Ulta Beauty, Serena and Lily, Toys R Us, discussing their journey to full composability. And it was a great webinar, and there's going to be links in this one connecting to that. But in the process of producing that, in the process of putting it together, I actually reached out to over 1,000 chief digital officers, chief customer officers, chief technology officers from retailers that are not my clients. They are your clients, but they connected, and it was wonderful to hear from them and have them join and hopefully learn something from that. But one of the things that came very clear in our discussions was that the biggest challenge in going to full composable is mapping that data. And one of the real difficulties that the systems integrators have had is they haven't often had the sort of data architect that, or the data, I would have to say, expertise to really make that transition. There's a few of you out there. Obviously, Orium is kind of in a class by itself. I mean, you got maybe two other companies out there that are in your peer group, but you kind of help obviate that problem. So it was wonderful to have Sana join us, because essentially the secret sauce of Conscia is mapping. It's taking that problem right off of the table. So I guess we could start off with, my first question is this podcast has been mostly focused on buyers trying to do some composability, but on commerce, digital experience or similar solutions that weren't composable native. And more people are talking about composable. How is the market evolving in 2024? And we'll start with Jason.
I'm going to build off of the concept of composable native. I like that word. I think end of last year, early this year, it was very clear. Any firm, say kind of the 90% of the market that it was not composable native to begin with, is now trying to add composable capability. I think it was on a webinar the other day, HCL and composable. And that's, I think, when it's gone to the mainstream. At some of the industry events so far this year, the terms pragmatic composable coming out, because it's just, hey, like, I don't want to do all of it with all the things. I just want enough for me, for my business, and that I can build on over time, right? And that's I think that's a reasonable concept. That's probably right for the majority of brands. What I think you do have to watch, and this is what you start to make sense of, is, okay, if you're using composable native solutions, they've been building the roadmap around this for 5 or 10 years, and they're exceptionally robust in this use case. I look at when it's an add-on, composable as an add-on, or in some cases even worse, it's a retrofit. The product maybe wasn't built for APIs, wasn't built to be API controlled, wasn't built with the concept that other products are around it doing other things. Then, often we see that as one of the largest risk factors in moving to composable. And so we really try to guide our customers on, hey, you could keep these two systems, but these ones probably are going to underperform. Or if you keep them, you have to understand things aren't going to take 10% longer. They'll take 2 to 3 times longer. And that can risk a program. So you've got to set expectations around that. There's got to be a really good reason why you would. But everyone's trying to make sense of composable, what products can adapt to a composable world. And ultimately, I think that's the right thing for the concept. Now it's, how do you guide it? That's actually where we do like working with Conscia, because some of it as well is, it's not just opening the APIs up, but sometimes the data model in a product, a legacy product, or a composable, a non-composable native option, it's not just that you can't control parts of that product through API, but that the data model coming out of it is not optimized for use outside of the system. And so we start to look at tools like a Conscia where they can set in the middle and optimize that. And I'm saying I can speak to how they do that a little. I won't steal her thunder on that one, but we really do start to see if you're keeping non-composable native solutions in your stack, you should look very seriously at kind of an intermediary to improve performance and improve access to the data model.
Yeah, you bring up a point. One of they're obviously incomposable. There have been some failures, and the failures have been with that lack of an intermediary layer, essentially piloting the data to where it needs to go. But what are customers asking for in plain language? And Sana, I think good time for you to pick it up here.
So when we think about composability, you can't really just take different Lego pieces of the composable tech stack and just glue it together. Just because you glued 4 different composable pieces together doesn't actually make your stack composable. So that's one clarification that I think one point that a lot of people don't understand. They think that you could just build any tech stack by pulling on a bunch of different composable services. So when we think about orchestration, it's really creating an abstraction layer between all of the various backend systems and all of the various front-end channels that you want to create, so that you're not coupling any of those backend systems like a commerce engine, like a CMS, a promotion engine, legacy systems, etc., with any one specific channel. You want swappability. You want compostability as much as you want composability. And when I say compostability, you want to be able to swap things in and out, right? Now, when a customer comes to us, that's not what they're asking. Okay, so they're not coming and saying, hey, I want to be able to swap things in and out. There's really 4 different types of customers that come to us, right? So one is existing customers of all-in-one, non-composable native solutions, such as Salesforce, SAP, Adobe, etc. Now, they have a web channel that they've built on top of their existing solution with a presentation framework that came out of the box with those solutions. But now they're ready to, they've kind of outgrown it. They want to build features and functionality that would be very difficult to build on a pre-integrated, all-in-one suite that they bought. So they are starting to think, okay, how do I add more features? How do I add more flexibility into my platform? How do I even build new channels, right? So I want to go beyond the web. I want to go beyond, just what I have. I want to have a mobile app. I want to have an experience on the kiosks within the store. So how am I going to do that with this existing all-in-one suite that was really catered towards the web, right? So that's one thing. The next one is that they actually have some pretty hardcore architects within the organization in the engineering departments, and they're looking at all of these composable pieces that they want to bring together. They've bought into this concept of composability. They know that's the right way to go, but they're really worried that if I just tie everything together too closely again, am I going to create another monolith once again? So there are folks out there, small number, I would say, mostly SI led, I would say as well, who know that that's not the right approach to just tie everything together too closely. Then there are others that are just worried about the time and cost of all of this. As you said, Daryl, one of the biggest problems with building a composable tech stack is the amount of time and effort it takes to engineer that solution. You're essentially building a product, right? It's not just about gluing things together. You got to bring it together in the right way. And it takes time to do it the right way. So they're concerned about, how do I reduce the time and effort and the total cost of ownership and the maintainability of the solution? So that's the third type. And then finally, they just want to offer new channels. They have an architecture, it's working for their existing website, but they just don't know what they have to do to add on more channels. Are they going to have to build brand new integrations with all of those backend systems? They're starting to see the future, that the writing on the wall, that if I keep building like a backend for front end, for instance, for each of my new channels, then am I going to create fragmentation in the experience that the customer is going to see as well? So they're coming at us with a whole different set of problems, And the solution at the end of the day is that's why we built Conscia, is because we recognize that whether you're working with modern systems, API first, composable native platforms, or you're working with legacy systems, our ICP is generally very large enterprises, so at least $1 billion in revenue or more. We're trying not to address the issues of the more mid-sized market. It's more for the enterprise market where they're living in a hybrid landscape, and they have all kinds of systems. Data is everywhere, content is everywhere. They want to create multiple channels, multiple experiences. Now, how do we do it in the most effective, the most future-proof, the fastest, the cheapest way possible?
This is about sharing data, but Sana, how would you describe the limitation of those applications that are not composable by design?
A couple of big things. I think, Jason, you touched on one of them. So some of the APIs that were either built after the fact, so it was a bit of an afterthought in trying to go composable because that's what the customer is asking. So let's add composability and headless capabilities to our solution, ended up in APIs that were not really meant to be called directly from the front end. There is too much work required by the front end to really consume those APIs. Like, I'll give you an example. One of the all-in-one platforms that we're working with, when you look at trying to create a category navigation structure, right? So a practical example, you have to essentially make multiple calls to get the full tree back. You can't get that full tree in one call because the one call only gives you the current category and just its children. But in order to put a full navigation on your website, you need all of those, the entire hierarchy. So in that scenario, the API is really an issue, but the way we solve that with an orchestration layer that sits on top of it is that the orchestration layer is making multiple calls to build that category navigation tree and then caching it dynamically. And that can be cached at a customer segment level. Maybe different customer segments need to see completely different category navigation. So that solves the problem of optimization, but also indirectly solves the problem of performance as well. Because you can imagine if the front end had to do that work in real time to go build that category navigation structure, that's a lot of API calls going back and forth. You're doing API chaining and stitching of data and caching that. All of that stuff has to now happen somewhere else, and that's going to take time, and the response times suffer.
If I could elaborate on that a bit too, Sana, we see customers where there's certain systems that we keep in the mix. Maybe there's a reason why, maybe there's functionality, maybe it's just change management. But I can think of examples where everything else except one system is kind of a more modern, composable, API-oriented product. But if one of your core systems of record is not, like I'm thinking of a program that we completed last year where the APIs would often take 2-3 seconds to respond. So now we can't use them in real time. Often there'd be limits on the number of calls coming in. So now we've got to have a middle layer to stitch it all together and then keep that in the cache. Resolve any issues with that across all the form factors we were bringing it out to. Sometimes we couldn't control things back in the core product. So we'd have to find workarounds or just accept there's no way to solve for this. Sorry, customer. Now, in this case, I think in that case, actually, the product itself had some really industry-specific things that it probably was worth doing the workarounds, but it was a 7-figure differential compared to the tooling that we would often work with composable native.
Wow.
To do all of that extra abstract. Part of the problem was that the particular legacy system we were working with only had 2 or 3 customers using their APIs. The features were changing. They would change their we'd use it. They'd say, "Oh, you're right. Maybe we should do it differently." And they'd rework it. So then we'd have to go rework. It sounds like such a subtle thing. Oh, well, how different can APIs really be? And they can be very, very different. Especially if you're using someone who's only has like less than a handful of customers truly using their product in a composable manner. You've got to be very careful with that. These things really do add up.
We often say that as well, that Conscia acts as the middle layer or the brain. We also like to say the brain. That sounds a lot nicer, of that composable stack. But one of the things that we're also seeing and we're helping a lot of our customers is not just the integration from the front end to the back ends, but the integration between systems as well. So one of the recent customers that we actually just started working on 4 weeks ago, they have 26 different integrations that need to happen between. So this is actually like commerce tools, Algolia, content stack, web service that does, it's like an inventory web service, a pricing web service, etc. And what they need to do is to create, oh, and there's an ERP, of course, there's always an ERP and a CRM. So all this data from all these backend systems needs to be unified in some way before it is pushed out to other platforms that are going to be consumer facing, right? So what we're doing is one of the modules of Conscia here called the DX graph. What it does is it allows you to sync your data through various methodologies. So batch exports, pub sub. So all those data providers are essentially writing the data to Conscia, and then we're pushing that data out to other systems on an ongoing basis. Like, so if a data record changes in the DX graph, make an update to Algolia. If a data record changes, make an update to commerce tools. So this work, we don't call that part orchestration. That's more integration, data integration effort. Typically, you end up using either ETL scripts or tools like MuleSoft in large enterprise organizations to do this type of work. And it is, I'm not like kidding, millions in effort and licenses to do that work. And when you start to think about a composable architecture, beyond just all the various legacy systems that need to be all synced and integrated, you add 5 or 10 more systems with composable tech stack. Now you've ballooned that problem completely out of proportion, and you can't use the traditional methods anymore for integration. So we've, through our orchestration layer, that problem that typically would be solved between maybe 9 to 12 months of development effort is now 4 to 8 weeks of development effort. So which is, and one, I would say 1/3 to 1/4 of the cost of doing it the traditional way as well. So that's what our organizations are looking to do. That in this economy, they want to save money and they want to save time. They want to get ahead of their competition. They're not interested in year-long projects, and that's why also to Jason, and to you, your point, Daryl, we can't boil the ocean, right? You got to go one step at a time. You can't expect people to platform. They are going to have their existing systems to work with. We got to be pragmatic. If we're going to make composable win, we can't do replatforms. You got to chisel away at those backends slowly and use the strangler method to do so.
It also reduces risk too. I mean, wherever we can find now, I always like to say, if we talk to somebody who's gone down the composable route, one of the first questions out of my mouth, or two first questions, how long ago did you start? Because your options to do this 1 year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago were very, very different. It was much harder each increment back. Even this year, it's way different than last January.
That's right.
In terms of productized options. Right. And when you have a productized option now, at least like with the Conscia, we know that integration's been done, properly considered. We know what it can and can't do. We know it's probably been used by a couple customers, so you're not the first, which reduces not just time and cost, it reduces risk. I'm often looking at that as wherever we can bring productized options in. Like we're not in the interest of pipe banging. That's not the high value work that we can do. Yeah. We want to find any option we can to simplify the customer's path to composable. And there's so many productized options now that just weren't there a year ago. The second question, to go back a moment, was which systems did you bring with you, right? Because often when we hear, hey, what did I love? And what was a challenge? What they love is in the new systems, and what the challenge was is what they tried to bring with them. And so if you're bringing legacy or non-composable native systems with you, productized options to bring them into a composable context, like a Conscia, that helps. At least it would alleviate my concern. It'd be the first thing out of my mouth is, okay, well, what are we putting in to help kind of surround that system? Ideally, that's productized, not custom.
Definitely. And I'll add something to what you just said, Jason, as well. So product is one thing. It's great. We love our product. The tooling's great. But at the end of the day, we're providing a framework and a platform to work with. It's a set of tools. You can completely use it in the wrong way and mess up your entire architecture as well, even with Conscia in the middle. You can. If you really want to do it the wrong way, you still can do it the wrong way with Conscia. So you need expertise. I think more and more as we move from the single sort of like all-in-one suites to the composable stack, the role of the SIs, the true composable SIs like Orium, I think become so much more important, because like something like we said earlier, which is you're building a product. You essentially are building a product. So if you think you can just build a product all by yourself without really having any expertise around how to connect all those pieces the right way, you're going to definitely fail. No matter what product you have or what piece of the puzzle you buy. You can buy Commerce Tools on its own, Algolia on its own, Content Stack on its own, Conscia on its own, right? But if you don't know how to put it all together and where you should actually use what product, and how they should be integrated, you can't do it. Like it's going to fail, and it's going to take forever, and you're going to redo a bunch of work, months from now. And those are the kind of implementations that actually end up failing, where the customer doesn't know what they're doing, or the SI doesn't know what they're doing. I've seen a lot of those very sad cases, and they make composable look bad.
If I could think of, because I think we're all worried about making sure that things go smoothly if if this is the right path for a customer. I would almost think of two buckets there. There's, hey, I already am doing composable, whether I'm calling that or not, right?
Yeah.
I've got separate search, CMS, front end, PIM, OMS, POS. I've got all of that separate anyways. I find that the majority of the market now, though, they're coming from something that was an all-in-one. They were used to an all-in-one, and maybe they've added one or two things around it, and that felt kind of painful. Often those are the customers we're hearing using the word pragmatic composable. What I think we're finding is different in our approach there. We're not starting with a blank slate with those customers. Most of the either some vendors have added enough kind of composable capability, and it's not all, but there's a couple where, you know what, you can do a lot of what you need to do now. If you just need to do X, Y, and Z, sure, fine. And then you'll hit the wall, but you can do that. Or you can now go get a big commerce, a Commerce Tools, and you essentially spin up a full working commerce site. So basically start with that. And then let's figure out how we adapt and bring in, but you can take a much more pragmatic approach, but with something that's composable native. But you can spin it up out of the box and cover a default commerce scenario. Now our expertise is less about the stitching and the build from scratch, because you don't have to do that. More around, and let's just plug in these 2 or 3 systems well for you. And we know what they can and can't do, and we'll guide you there. But it's that pragmatic composable concept. And that's different this year. That didn't exist a year ago.
Yeah, and I'm seeing exactly the same thing. And we actually recently, and I know that we were going to talk about that later anyway, but recently we partnered with Salesforce for that pragmatic, or what they call hybrid composable solutions, right? So they have various, like thousands of customers actually on Site Genesis version of Salesforce today. And a lot of those customers are outgrowing that version of Salesforce, right? So they want to go headless because they're thinking, if we go headless, we can now start to take advantage of, just better front ends, better user experience. We can venture out to build more channels, etc., that are not currently possible on Site Genesis. And Salesforce itself is telling their customers to either go to the next version of Salesforce, which is SFRA, or your other option is composable, Salesforce Composable, which is now using the APIs under the hood that SiteGen was also built on top of. However, those APIs were not built for a truly headless solution, right? So where Conscia comes in that partnership, Salesforce has always been API native. It's just that the earlier versions of Salesforce assumed that a lot of the work was going to be done in that presentation layer. A lot of that business logic is also in the presentation layer. A lot of integration, remapping of data, a lot of that's going on in the presentation layer. And now they want to decouple that. But the APIs, of course, they're not composable native. So what do you do? So in our case, what we've done is we've built connectors to Salesforce. So the orchestration layer sits on top of it, does essentially fills that gap that existed with those APIs, and now provides a nice, clean, packaged response for a headless front end. So the headless front end doesn't have to talk to those APIs directly, talk to Conscia, and the entire integration process becomes a lot simpler. But at the same time, now you can also connect to other technologies, such as Content Stack and Contentful, if you want to bring in a headless CMS, because CMS is not a core capability of Salesforce Commerce is, right? And then you can bring in your own pricing engine, you can bring in your own promotion engine or inventory service or even an OMS. So they're open to you bringing in other tools to the mix as long as we're using that commerce engine at the core. And a lot of their customers are now starting to look at that as a very viable option. So, to your point, Jason, like 90%, I would say, of the market right now is starting with something. They're not starting from scratch. Most of the time, they're not starting from scratch. And so you have to figure out a way to introduce composability into their existing architecture one step at a time, rather than assuming that they're just going to migrate completely to a brand new architecture.
Well, I think it's fair to make the point here that that is a bridging technology for Salesforce. And the advantage of going with one of the modern cloud native solutions is obviously you have one commerce engine that can drive all of your channels, essentially an infinite number. Whereas with the Salesforce architecture, you're still essentially tethered to create for every channel, every instance, you have to have another instance of that Salesforce commerce engine. The same thing with the Oracle, which I prefer to call them decapitated versions, and even so, they were you've made it a little bit easier to guide that torso that's running around, without any direction with Conscia. But it is, I still think it's a much more aptly described as a bridging solution to actually strangle the fig more effectively and allow those customers to adapt the best of headless in that they have a better content experience, they have a better digital experience, they have a better CX, they have better ability to capture that data, they have better ability to use modern hyper-personalized real-time data, both capturing and in refreshing their site as it's being utilized. And that can only take place with the modern cloud native microservice architecture, headless, cloud native API led developed solutions like obviously Commerce Tools or Elastic Path or Fabric now on the come as well. So just to be clear here, if I want to increase my composability but not re-platform my commerce, what are my options?
I think again, some of it who are you starting with, and which version of their product? Because often, these products require a major lift and shift across major versions. So V1 versus V2 versus V3. V1, don't even try. V3, hey, you can do some things, and let's talk about it. I think I would say very much that abstraction layer, that performance layer, like choosing who you're bringing in for that matters and makes a difference. So you're going to have to invest a little more probably in a productized solution that's doing that, because the commerce product you're keeping just was never, it's a retrofit to serve an actual performant front end. And rather than a bunch of work and work around with a firm like us, I would much rather that you put it into a product that has productized adaptation to make that work well, at least improve your ability to use it in a composable or headless construct. I think sometimes as well, I would say something like a Conscia can be nice, where can say different from other iPaaS or integration products. Conscia being very commerce focused, you've got the personalization capability built in. So there's a nice thing where, hey, we can abstract that, and then also you're getting personalization built in. So there's a clear win. It's not just the same thing but a little faster or with a little more control. Customers see an immediate benefit, and there's
a new feature.
Yeah. So we often try to package the two, that some of the commerce specific vendors approaching this problem have added unique capabilities to their product that consumers will notice, and then it's win-win for everybody.
Right. And to add to that, Jason, the way I see a lot of these conversations go is you're asking the customer, what are you doing composable for? What's the point, right? So the most obvious thing is the customer experience. I want to I want to do something new, right? I want to change something on my website and I'm not able to. I can't add a new search capability because that just doesn't work natively with my current DXP or my current commerce platform, or a CMS. So understanding sort of what you're trying to achieve is quite important, because if you don't, then it feels almost like you're just philosophically making a decision to just move to um, another platform just because it's cloud native, and just because it's a composable native. You have to really understand what exactly is the problem right now. So there's a short-term problem to be solved, and then there's a long-term problem to be solved, right? If you only focus on the long term, then the immediate benefit, you're not going to get the budget, first of all, to do it, right? You have to give wins now. If I'm going to spend $500,000 on this project, then I better get an experience that is better for the customer. And so working backwards is a good thing. And then having this sort of a layer that sort of abstracts out everything under the hood, but still allows you to move further from an experience standpoint, offer new features, offer new capability on new channels, is a more practical option than completely doing a replatform immediately. But what it does allow you to do, having that abstraction layer for the future, is that you can start to take away some of those legacy systems out in a year, in 2 years. Once you start to prove out the value that, look, composability is actually doing me a favor here, I can actually build new experiences, you now can get that buy-in from your executives, and they will put money in then to get more of that long-term future-proofing benefit from the solution, right? So that's sort of how we see it. It's not an all or nothing ever. You have to move slowly, you have to move pragmatically, because that's where most of the customers are at. And especially in today's economy, you're not going to get $5 million to do like a complete replatform from scratch. You would get maybe $500,000, and you know, that you could use to show some value, and then next year get another $500,000. That's at least what we've seen with most of the projects that we're part of right now.
Well, I mean, a lot of folks build a new house and they move their old furniture into it, or they, and they might have an ancient easy chair that they're really comfortable with, and essentially, if they had, an interior designer that could find a way to make that look okay around all of their other new furniture, they'd essentially have what Conscia does to taking all of those old applications and sticking in that wonderful new looking house. To
You mean
use
lipstick on a pig? Is that what you're?
I think it's far more sophisticated than that. Far more sophisticated than I can tell.
Absolutely.
I would never say anything like that. I would never say anything.
All
But
good, all good.
But I do think that there's more than enough of that out there. But this is definitely allowing that intervening step that lays the groundwork for a successful full scale transformation. And companies, as you say, if you're a global company that's doing more than $1 billion in revenue and you have dozens of channels, you can't do it all at once. That's just not feasible. It's not tenable. But you need to, this is a very reasonable, easy to achieve set of wins on getting a far more reflexive customer experience using this orchestration tool. But there's obviously, we hear the term orchestration a lot in the market. I've heard of obviously Octu and EnterSpeed use that term. How is Conscia different from them?
Great question. I wish I could put an entire diagram in front of you that shows all the capabilities of Conscia, but the way I look at it is I can break it down into two things. So one, you have backend systems that have APIs, and others systems in most large enterprises, I would say 100% of large enterprises, that don't have APIs. So not even we're not even talking composable native, we're talking no APIs. It's just batch type of systems. Now, when you're building an experience, there are two types of integrations that are involved in building it. One from front end to back end, and one, which I was saying earlier, horizontal integrations between systems as well. You can think of our two modules, the DX engine and the DX graph, solving those two problems respectively. So the DX engine solves the problem of making API calls to various backend systems, anything that can offer an API, and creating that abstraction there so the front end doesn't know what backend it's talking to anymore. So you can, from the backend, you want to replace one CMS for another, you can do that, no problem. So less of a, I guess, disruption in your customer experience as you change your technology behind the scenes. The other part is the DX Graph, which is essentially creating a data hub, an API first data hub from all of those backend systems, and not just creating that data hub, but actually pulling the data and pushing the data to other systems at the same time. So acting in a way as an integration platform to some degree, but with that added benefit that non-technical users and product teams can actually go in to one place and see, not just know that it's there, but see the data all in one place and validate it, enrich it if need be, transform that data, make it ready, prepare it for that front end as well. Octu and Interspeed, they act more as, in my opinion, and they may not completely agree, but as caching mechanisms for the backend data to make that data available to the front end faster and all from one place. So now you don't have to call those legacy systems because you can't call them anyway. You need a place for them to be cached. So you put it into Octu or Interspeed and you create different views of that data that the front end can then call. What it's missing is that first piece, the DX engine piece is not there at all with Octu and Interspeed. So no API orchestration is happening there. And what's also not happening is a place for business users and non-technical users to go see what's in that repository. Can I touch and feel that data? Can I search for information within that repository? So that piece is quite different with Conscia. So I'm not saying that there isn't a place for them. I think there are some use cases where something like that is very, I think it's very beneficial to have. But I think we have to talk about use case by use case. Can you use Conscia in this case? Can you use Octu in this case? And I would say, are a superset of a lot of integration and orchestration capabilities, whereas Octu and Interspeed are more, maybe 20 to 30% of our capability.
And if I could add on, because when we try to walk it through for our customers, often look like there's a set of solutions which it's about caching, performance, and kind of maybe a common protocol that you can get to. There's a subset. You didn't use the word connectors there, but I would say there's a subset. You can tell based on the systems they support with pre-written productized connectors. You can click in one step further, right? So people, when you got a vendor who's supporting fintech or legacy finance, you're going to find a different set of connectors than those specialized in commerce and DXP. So a vendor who has all that pre-supported is going to save you a lot of time, money, effort, risk. And then we start to look at added capability. So then again, the more specialized you get, again, whether it's, you'll get some where the added capability is going to be more CX oriented or core systems out to your CX and kind of user experience. You're going to get some that are much more specialized system to system. I just did a webinar on order routing, and it's specialists who are just trying to move order and inventory data, and that's where they've specialized, and you're not going to use them out to the CX the same way. And so, Sana, you've got personalization capability. There's approaches where you're looking at, AI capability or auto optimization. Like there's you can tell by that added capability. Sometimes that's appropriate, and okay. Then you're going to want if you want that, that's the benefit. So it's kind of looking at the options and seeing. You can start to, once you go a couple steps in, you can tell like would a specialized vendor here in DX really help me? And then the last one, of course, you mentioned is, do you need business user? What's the degree of code control versus business user tooling? That's going to subset your options further.
Right. Yeah. One of the just a recent project that we worked on, the biggest reason for them to go with Conscia, besides the time to market, and was self-service. And the fact that they did not have the skill set, like very technical skill set, to do all those integrations themselves, they wanted it's still, they're using some APIs in Conscia to do those integrations, but it's configuration. There is no deployment. There is no heavy duty coding to move data around between systems, and they can actually validate the data immediately. So which means they can move a lot faster. Their integration testing is a lot easier because now they can see, oh, this field from this system, do I see it here? Oh, I added another field from another system to my data model. Can I actually see it? Can I see all the data in that field? So immediately with our validation cards as well within the platform, you can see, like, is there something missing? Are there gaps in my data? It just moves things so much faster, and it's more agile way of doing integrations.
Well, Sana, you've been very supportive of your SI community and have embarked on numerous accelerator projects. And who have you been working with mostly?
I would say SIs that actually understand composable architecture. And it's it's like a needle in the haystack. I would say it's not easy to find expertise and understanding and like being aligned on the same vision of the architecture for our customers. So Orium, of course, as you can tell, Jason's one of our partners, and we're building some integrations together as well for Salesforce, for other commerce platforms. So Conscia is being used as an orchestration layer to showcase for customers that need this sort of capability what that architecture would look like. We have others that are, so a lot of the SIs that we actually work with, because of the same pragmatic reason that we were talking about earlier, they have a practice for Salesforce and Adobe and Sitecore and SAP, etc. But they also have completely composable practices. So, for example, EPAM is one of our partners. We're working with them on both fronts, both completely composable accelerators and Salesforce-specific composable accelerators. Royal Cyber is another one, which that one is actually more Salesforce and DXP all-in-one sort of platform focused. But they have just yesterday released an accelerator that they've built with Conscia in the middle of Salesforce and the web front end, their PWA kit, Valtech. So again, all of these are enterprise level SIs who really understand, like, and help the customer with their technology strategy. So not just coming in to implement something after somebody else has made the decisions to implement it or to architect it a certain way, but they come in, they are the ones who are really guiding the customer through that entire digital transformation journey. But I would love to hear, Jason, your experience with with Conscia so far, and how this partnership is going for you guys.
Sure. And actually, we take a moment in jargon land.
Yeah.
Let's define the word accelerator, right? Let's just define accelerator as a concept, because
I really wanted to get there.
Yeah,
I honestly wanted to get there. I'm sorry it took so long.
And the short form,
ironically,
how's my background noise? Sorry, the kids are in the background. Can you hear them?
Oh, yay!
Is the background noise okay?
Oh, it's fine.
Sure, I love it.
You're human, Jason.
Everyone, accelerators are really
People
fun.
know you're human.
Yeah,
We're not AI.
Accelerators are so much fun. The kids are playing with them in the next room.
Kids love them. So let's think of accelerators. So accelerators are generally, it's not a SaaS product, but it's it's essentially a starter, pre-written integrations. And any SI worth their salt in the composable space should be coming to the table with that. And some have essentially produced a white paper and said, here's our accelerator. We can tell you what we like to snap together. What you really want, like, we've spent millions on pre-integration. And so what you want is one of the very defined subset who have truly productized a jumpstart. And in our case, what's unique is, for most, that comes as, here's the pre-integrations. So you don't have to pay us to write the integration we've done 10 times before. And that kind of just gets you much further. It reduces risk. So accelerators. Now, I like to say ours is the most composable accelerator because we don't have this version, this version, this version, this version. Ours has been architected in a way where we have 5 commerce options, 4 search options, 4 CMS options, payments, checkout, promotions, loyalty, all of that, we can take that variety. Now, what we end up doing, though, is that only works if it's a composable native or composable performance solution. I got to be able to call them directly. If we feel that a customer is going to need to spin up multiple new channels or deal with multiple commerce systems, or it's working with a commerce system that we wouldn't consider to have sufficient composable capability. Like you can get there, but you need that performance. You need something like a Conscia in the middle. Then that's where we work with Conscia. So I'd rather integrate with a Conscia who can then open up a whole new realm of options. So that's where we find that partnership can work very well. You're gonna have to pay Sana your monthly fee, but there's a whole added set of capability, performance, and flexibility over time, personalization, business user tooling. The unlock is worth it there. So I think that's that pre-written one time paired with kind of flexibility, SaaS tooling over time. It's finding the right balance in between. And Sana has obviously been very focused on knowing where the SI community has a role to play.
I would say SIs that actually understand composable architecture. And it's it's like a needle in the haystack. I would say it's not easy to find expertise and understanding and like being aligned on the same vision of the architecture for our customers. So Orium, of course, as you could tell, Jason's one of our partners, and we're building some integrations together as well for Salesforce, for other commerce platforms. So Conscia is being used as an orchestration layer to showcase for customers that need this sort of capability what that architecture would look like. We have others that are, so a lot of the SIs that we actually work with, because of the same pragmatic reason that we were talking about earlier, they have a practice for Salesforce and Adobe and Sitecore and SAP, etc. But they also have completely composable practices. So, for example, EPAM is one of our partners. We're working with them on both fronts, both completely composable accelerators and Salesforce-specific composable accelerators. Royal Cyber is another one, which that one is actually more Salesforce and DXP all-in-one sort of platform focused, but they have just yesterday released an accelerator that they've built with Conscia in the middle of Salesforce and the web front end, their PWA kit, Valtech. So again, all of these are enterprise level SIs who really understand and help the customer with their technology strategy. So not just coming in to implement something after somebody else has made the decisions to implement it or to architect it a certain way, but they come in, they are the ones who are really guiding the customer through that entire digital transformation journey. But I would love to hear, Jason, your experience with Conscia so far and how this partnership is going for you guys as well.
Well, this whole series is really devoted to those merchants that are considering that are trying to remain competitive and have a problem innovating, have a problem matching the customer experience that their competitors are providing, have a problem getting into a new market, have a problem retaining their customers because they're just not presenting themselves to their best ability. And while composable, in my humble opinion, is the only way to truly future-proof their business by adopting a framework that allows them to constantly innovate and to do so easily and cheaply and with a minimum of headcount. Getting there does cost money, does take time. And as we've outlined today, Conscia with data experience orchestration is a very smart investment for those companies that have very large legacy commerce platforms that they want to add more flexibility to provide a more modern customer experience personalization, and are on the roadmap to full composability and are partnered with a company that in Conscia that is gearing them towards that and providing them the fundamentals to make that transition easy. And to Jason's point, if you're going to go full composable, you need to do it with an agency that is fully vested in the game. And that doesn't just mean we're a partner and we have the ability to stand up a solution. It means with composable, you understand the myriad of solutions that go into crafting a platform of 15, 16, 20 components potentially that's going to serve an unlimited number of channels. And that requires a far more artful approach to architecture, a far more consultative team of professionals that are devoted to composable commerce, not just doing it as a sideline, not doing it as just a line of business, but that's what they're committed to because that's the level of expertise you need and can rely on. And those firms are going to have a fully realized set of technologies that are accelerators that are going to make you successful, not in 2 years, but in a year or less. And that is, again, my whole blab about this is for you merchants, for you retailers out there listening, this is for you. This is to make it easier for you to make that step. And Sana, I really appreciate you joining us today and sharing the wonderful solution you've developed there at Conscia. And I wish you the best of success. I'm sure you're going to have it because you're providing a tremendous amount of value here for those folks that are saddled with Hybris and Oracle and Salesforce. And Jason, Guy, thanks for putting together one of the greatest digital agencies I've ever gotten to know.
Appreciate that. And thanks for continuing to tell the story and the trend of composable, especially as it continues to go mainstream. More and more people are hearing about it. I think it's great that you're helping guide how to do it well.
Thank you so much for having me as well, Daryl. Really appreciate it. This was a great conversation with experts in the room. It's rare to have that kind of a mix.
Thanks for listening to Martalks. Please leave a review and a rating on your platform of choice. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major podcast platforms. To find out more about how the Rosenstein Group can help you find the right leaders for your client development teams in martech and e-commerce, please visit our website, rosensteingroup.com.